For
Okay.
those that don't know me, my name is Grant Gemmell. I'm the managing director here at Facet5 Global, and the amazing team we have here in Cambridge, and the people all around the world. You'll see a whole range of people here. We've got people in Malta who work with us based in the States, Francesco in Australia, Julie, obviously, Ina, who's in Norway, um, Diane, who's in Italy, Michiel, I saw joined, who's in the Netherlands, etc., etc. Piotr and Nina from Poland. So we make up a great global community of Facet5 practitioners. So what we're talking about today, and just so you know, we are being recorded as well, is that we want to talk about what are strengths, what we been talking about more locally, what we see is that strength-based movement coming through into the market, which is so refreshing and so welcome in what is often a disease-based model or a deficit-based model around development. So this focus on strengths has become really interesting. We wanted to have a chat about what they are and what we see them as, what some of those benefits and attributes, what some of the return on investment is, and then how we can support that from a Facet5 perspective. The first question is, I suppose, what do we actually mean by strengths? And to the group, and you can add it into the chat, I'd be interested to know if you're using strength profiles, for example, things like Gallup or VIA strengths or those sort of tools, and what you found useful around that in your work. Because I think I've got one of each because I'm nosy and like to see what people are doing. But I'd be really interested to see if you are using those sort of strength-based tools or if you're seeing a demand for those in the work that you do. Good response, Diane. Good response. We see all of our strengths with Facet5. Yes. Um, yeah, early career stages. Great. So are you using particular tools or particular profiles, for example, that you found really useful and encouraging of people in that true strengths movement? I'm a particular fan of the tools like VIA Strengths. They're a little bit different maybe to the Clifton or the Gallup Strength Finder. Yeah, don't find it very helpful. Yeah, great. So I think when you do look across the range of tools, and we've been working a lot, I suppose, in both the neuroscience space, the positive psychology space, the strength-based space, and the pure psychology and development space. And it's an interesting kind of perfect storm just at the moment. So it's interesting that some of these probably complementary approaches are starting to come more mainstream as we put more research around them, particularly things like neuroscience, for example. But even the concepts of positive psychology, which have always been kind of on the fringe and people going, yeah, right. It's kind of like giving you a warm hug and patting you on the back and saying, I love you. They're becoming a bit more mainstream. They're becoming more integrated in the way that we work. So when we have a look and you have a look across some of the definitions of what is a strength, of whether it's your talents, knowledge, and skills, which comes out of the Clifton work, for example, those recurring patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, whether it's the Seligman work, which is around strengths as positive traits reflected in your feelings and behaviors, or whether that's the Linley work, which is quite interesting around those pre-existing capacity, and that language around pre-existing capacity for me sounds, kind of attracts me around. The interesting thing here is that these all have some common elements when you read through them. So this is coalescing almost of view around what strengths particularly look like. And some of those common elements are that we're seeing more and more is that they are positive traits. So when we mean traits, we mean those inherent characteristics that we are born with or develop over a period of time that become stable and enduring over our lifetime. They are pre-existing. So while there's a big movement around developing skills and developing attributes, for example, a lot of these are saying that the strengths that you have are pre-existing, and it's about how you identify, harness, and leverage those in your life. If they're a trait, then they're going to be reflected in the way that we behave, think, and feel, and that's an important attribute as well, and that they are authentic, and particularly they are energizing. So we think about this flow state that we often talk about when you're in that space that people find you are completely absorbed in the moment, working authentically. You feel like you're at your own, at your best. Things feel more effortless than they do effortful. So we're not in that constant state of stretch or flex or tension that we do often find ourselves in when we're in a role. So when we truly leverage our strengths, we find that those are coming from within ourselves. They are energizing, they're motivating, they feel more effortless in the way that they do, therefore feel more authentic in the way that we do those. And that gap between our personality and our display of our behaviors is minimized. It's reduced a little bit more. So we would say then strengths are a set of individual differences. They help us understand ourselves in comparison to other people. So very much like a trait-based model. We all have them in varying degrees, and they are displayed in varying degrees with varying degrees of skill, I would say, as well. So just because we have a strength doesn't mean that we're good at it. I think if we have a strength, and we still need to master that. We still need to figure out how that turns up as well. Individuals with the same strength or same strength description, just like as in personality, will display their strengths in quite unique ways. And that it's a language that we can give individuals to help them understand their own brilliance. And you'll see we use that statement quite a bit going forward, but also that others understand as well. So I'm interested, what do you think of that? What do you think of those statements? Would you add anything? Would you challenge any of that? Does that feel okay? Load of baloney? Right on. Thank you, Diane. Julie, in the work that we've been doing together and the work that you do outside of, Facet5 and the type of work you do, are you encountering this as well in the work you do?
Yes, and I think I would probably just add in something about it feeling a bit effortless.
Yeah.
So something just kind of flow. You mentioned flow state, and I think that for me really kind of captures what we talk about when we're talking about our strengths. We don't have to try very hard. It's our kind of state of being.
Yeah, so we can tap into them a little bit more easily and a bit more
Yeah.
frequently than maybe other states that we find ourselves having to stretch into, for example. And that stretch is obviously cognitive. So it's an applied effort that we need to put in to there. So we're talking about pulling right back and going, what is at the core of those things that motivate me, engage me, are effortless. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well, just from a language point of view, people like it when we talk about our strengths. It has positive. So the language that we use around a strength-based approach has a lot of instant validity for people. If I'm in workshops, and they like that as an approach.
Yeah, yeah. And I think McKeel's added a really good one, which is what others know you for, because it's that more, and I think that comes out of that authentic and energizing component, which is when things turn up well, they turn up authentically. You want others to know you for that. That's what you want to be recognized for as well. Is that what you're thinking, McKeel, when you put that in there?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean that in a positive way, of course. What others know you for, so not the negative side of things.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And Alan's sort of reiterated that as well. A basis to build on, yes, absolutely. Zrinka, that's a really good point. Our modus operandi, absolutely. It's kind of what we how we like to work, and why, more importantly. Martha, you put in there is so little emphasis on development, they may sound harsher than I mean it to. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Well, it may sound a little harsh that I'm suggesting that I think it really promotes the strengths, and it's like, okay, this is what I want to be known for. I don't need to improve because I have all of these wonderful strengths.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet there's
yeah.
a void there where imagine what you could do if you built on the other pieces of your personality, if you built up strengths in other areas.
Yeah, so true. And I think that comes down to saying just because we have a strength doesn't mean that we use it well, or sometimes that we're even aware of it. And obviously there are a whole range of mechanisms to identify strengths and strength-based behaviors. And I think they can be quite different. So what are those things that we naturally do well, and those things that we've learned to do well that have become kind of second nature in us as well. And I think, yeah, absolutely. When you think about the Facet5 profile, you think about the debrief, you think about our scales, it's all built there really to help us understand ourselves and where we start from, and where we need to flex to, because we all have to flex in every moment in our jobs. That's just the reality, or in our relationships, or in the cultures that we're in. So it's really helping us position ourselves and understanding, if we didn't have all of those obligations, expectations, and judgments around us, where would we start from? And therefore, where do we grow? Where can we grow to? Yeah. Fantastic. And there was a quick question in here around the difference between talents and strengths from Kasia, and I think that's a really good question. So let me a nice leadway into the into the next slide. Now, this content is a little bit more debatable, I think, from different areas, but it's coming out of the work that we've done with the Positive Psychology Institute around trying to get a definition between these to be a little bit clearer for people. So we think about talents as those more biological based, you know, for example, intelligence, music ability, sporting ability, all of those sort of things coming forward. We think about skills as specific proficiencies that we've developed. So that could be learning a trade, computing skills, for example, researching skills. And there's some of these that we're going to be naturally gravitate towards, I think, based on our personality, and we may find easier. Our interests then are those topics or areas that we're passionate about, that we're driven to pursue, whether that's, again, you know, playing sports, it's arts and craft, it could be gardening, or things that we put our attention to. And our interests then move and waver over our lifetime, obviously, as we pick up things and drop things off or become proficient in them. And then our values, which I think this is probably the more controversial one for me, which is it's the enduring beliefs, principles, and ideals that are of prime importance to the individual. And I think, you know, that is has a dual relationship with our personality. I think it is influenced by, but also influences. Any thoughts on those? No? Happy with that?
Can I have Grant a question, a quick question?
Yeah, of course you can.
So when the talent or skill or interests becomes a strength, how does it come that they become strengths?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if I have an answer for that. I think a talent becomes something that you may have practiced, that you become second nature to you. But does it become a strength or a learnt strength? So that is, you know, where's the, how do you put your attention to it is my question. If you're not putting your attention to it and it turns up well and positively, then I would say it's a natural strength. If you're putting your attention to it and it's still turning up well, I would say it's a learned strength and probably a talent that you've developed over that period of time. I think it's where your mind goes to. Do you just naturally do it without thinking? So it's what we call an unconscious competence, for example, or is it more of a conscious competence that you've developed in that it still takes a little bit of thinking, a little bit of effort, It's something that your body has to actually prepare for and do. Anybody else want to have a go at that? Is a strength an applied talent? Good question. And I don't know. And as I said, this is kind of a gray area for some people.
If I may, Grant, because
Yeah,
you know, my understanding of when something, you know, talent, yeah, it's like speaking a little bit of what Gallup says, and you know, talent is something that a little bit of potential that you're maybe born with, and whether it becomes strength or not is up to you. Something becomes strength and is your strength ultimately if that's if you develop a skill or a competence to a level where you definitely, when it becomes something that makes you stand out from the crowd, right? So this is where it is your strength. You know, if you're, you know, average or something, you know, this is not your strength. Your strength will be probably something that you're better, you know, than the others at. So that's my understanding, and ultimately leads to the situation where you're recognized for that quality or that competence, and that becomes your strength. So it's not only that your subjective feeling that you can do that well, but also, you know, you other people see you like that.
Yeah. So, and that's where I cross over into a talent as well. You know, people, the observable skills and strengths and knowledge all coming together as a potential talent that you've practiced. And again, Julie. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's something about your talent can kind of almost stand alone, and you can still have your strengths. So, you know, your talent could be playing the piano, for example, or playing golf or tennis, but then you still have these strengths that dictate how your talent shows up. Maybe. Yeah.
But I think what we're trying to say here is that when we think about our strengths, we're thinking about an inherent trait-based, well, from a Facet5 perspective, an inherent trace-based model that comes from within, that we're talking about is effortless, that is enduring over time and situation and circumstance. Now, I'm not a big fan of all the aspects of a trait-based model, which our personality is fixed. That, you know, you get to around 25 and it stops growing and maturing. I think it just matures at a different rate and a different pace in a different way. We do change over a period of time. I don't think we change from having a will score of 1 to a will score of 10. But, you know, we may change our emotionality from a 7 to a 6, for example, but we do have to grow and we mature over time. We often call, and then the display of that is the behaviors that we have, that pulsing of behaviors. And I think about my advocate profile, for example, when I first did it in about 2004, 2005, I've always been an advocate, but it's just been a different version of that, a bigger version or a smaller version of that over the last nearly 20 years. But I still think about it as strength. I still rely on core aspects of my personality on a day-to-day basis. How I access them and when I access them really depends on the context that I find myself in. Right. So, let me try that again. So there's some interesting things around the strength language and strength community. And again, having a chat with one of the people from the positive psych area, and we were talking about, so what makes a strength and what are some of the myths, I suppose, that they're trying to debunk when we're talking about strengths. One is the idea that fixing what is wrong leads to well-being, and that removing a negative state automatically creates a positive state. They tend to be on two continuums. And there's another point here is, you know, by happiness and sadness are not at the other ends of difference of the same spectrum. So it's interesting to think about that while we focus on fixing things, it doesn't necessarily mean to a positive state for the individual. The appearance of coping is a reflection of reduction of negative states. And I think, you know, with the work that we've done on well-being and resilience and all of those sort of things, we know that people are very good at leveraging their strengths in order to appear to be coping with, or better at coping with, negative environments and negative states. So the removal of a negative state doesn't mean that the individual is no less or more worse off than they were before. Correcting a weakness creates the environment for optimal performance. And this is an interesting one, and it comes, I think, to the heart of the strengths approach. And Julie, chime in. It's, you know, if we focus on a weakness, then we are getting better at recognizing and managing a weakness, versus actually when we focus on a strength and understand how that strength turns up and how to use it more and leverage it more, then we're able to bridge that gap versus focusing on the negative state. And I think that's probably the hardest one, because actually when we think about everything that we do, you think about the type of work we've done, whether you're a psychologist or doing development, we fix gaps. We go into team sessions often, we go into leadership programs, and we look at what's not working well. That disease model of psychology, or deficit model of psychology, is actually quite pervasive. It's how we structure most of the things. Performance conversations, performance management, all of those sort of things are based on that deficit model. What is it that we're trying to fix? So the strength movement sort of comes at it from the other way and saying, what have we got that we can now leverage? What have you got that's inherent in you? What are the amazing things, the brilliance and the magnificence of who you are? And what do you need in order to thrive? And then who do you need to work with? And what do you need in order to fit the context that you find yourself in? And like this one, it's like weaknesses need more attention because strengths take care of themselves. And actually, a strength can become a strength overplay because it's an unconscious incompetence. So if we're not actually putting attention to the actual strength itself, and we're only putting it to our weaknesses, then we're never going to grow those. We're never going to build the skill. We're never going to make it an accessible part of us that we can tap into with less effort and make that more natural for us. And you know, I use this thing all the time, but you know, if you've only got a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And it's the same with strengths. If you don't actually master those, understand the different scenarios and how to use those and do those well, one, you may not recognize that they're there, and two, you may end up overplaying that strength, and that becomes a risk in the work that you do. And that the deficit focus can prevent problems. There's a whole history of psychology, of medicine, of clinical support that fixes problems, but yet we have not been able to remove that problem from the work that they do. I think it's the same at work. It's like putting a Band-Aid on something as opposed to getting to the root cause. And what I think we can do from a strength perspective is help individuals understand where they thrive, where they're in flow, what's the things that motivate them, what gives them that energy, what creates that authentic self. So that whether they're in a career, whether they're in a role, or whether they're in a relationship, that they're tapping into and have access to more easily the strengths that make them who they are. So we've got less of that, less unconscious and probably unmanaged flex or stretch. It becomes more conscious. So therefore we give it a language, and then we can manage it more in the context that we find ourselves. We can't always isolate ourselves from a context that we don't want to be in. I'll stop there because it's me just talking, and you know, as I say, I like the sound of my own voice and everything. But I'm interested in what people think of that. If you're not used to a strength approach, or if you've not heard anything around the strength movement, then this can sound a bit left of center for sure. Diane, yeah.
Yeah, we've been using strength-based coaching and approaches in our training for at least 10 years, and find that whenever we work with a coachee, the objectives after they've done their Facet5 and they're designing their coaching path, is always finding one strength that they'd like to leverage and one area for improvement. Because the research tells us, for years we've known that when we focus on strengths, we help people more effectively in also leveraging in their everyday abilities, but also even on improving the areas that they can have for their development. So it's something that we fully believe in, recognize, and I can say that the use of Facet with our clients has been amazing to assist them in identifying those strengths. That's why I made that very flippant remark in my in the chat, which is because I really see it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, it's more, I would like to raise a question. There was one session yesterday talking about inner goals. How could be the relation between strengths and defining inner goals, and also getting results on the way.
I think it's a great question. For those folks, when we talk about inner goals, we're talking about a session that was held yesterday called around the inner development goals, which is coming out of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, a broader group of people. And it's talking about a broader movement of personal growth, personal accountability, and 5 streams within that, and a number of inner development goals. That when we take accountability for who we are, we take accountability for others, we take accountability for society and community and the planet, it is the only way we're going to sustainably go forward. It's quite a large and growing movement, particularly in the Scandic countries, more than anywhere else. I think, Viola, this plays into it really well. I think it supports it, because when we think about some of those inner development goals, we need to understand our approach to those. We need to understand where we're coming from and how we contribute to those, where that takes us as well. And that there's value in all aspects of that. You know, we've got really low affection and we've got people with high affection. There's no judgment on that. We all need to play a role. But I think at the heart of inner development goals is a personal accountability. I think that's the key message. We need to take accountability for ourselves and others and the community. And we need to do that from here and stretch out, I think, from ourselves.
Yeah, but therefore it's good to know our strengths already.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the strengths of others, because we don't operate in a vacuum. We have to collaborate and communicate and engage. And I think that appreciation of difference in the world as it is just today, if you watch the news, just that small understanding of difference, that appreciation of difference, I think just one step forward by everybody would, it would be an amazing thing. Yeah.
Thanks.
It's okay. And Martin, welcome. Martin's about to join our team, so lovely to have him on the call.
Hi.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good. And you made a really great comment there, found really helpful in the past to amplify and align your strength is to have a good mentor as well. And I think that's a really important Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So I suppose if you're sort of paired up with someone in the workplace who has similar strengths, but maybe it's a bit further along, maybe they have managed to sort of avoid certain pitfalls or something. I found that really helpful, and there isn't always time for that, but if you can make sort of like a conscious effort to do that, to link up with someone, that I found that really helpful.
Yeah, and I think it does change the way that we think about how we collaborate. We always think about collaboration as quite a tactical thing. We're trying to get something out, as opposed to collaboration in learning and style and access to styles, and how collaboration actually looks a little bit differently to mentor or learn or peer-to-peer mentoring and support and advice. So we're often good at giving and getting feedback, but sometimes advice is a valuable attribute as well. So thank you. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what are some of the benefits? We get asked a lot. I mean, a huge amount of time we get asked, what's the return on investment for investing in personality? And, we're not very good at answering that. My response is, do you ask for a return on investment on your marketing or anything else? So why, if people are your most important attribute, then why all of a sudden we've got these hard metrics around them? Now, I'm not saying it's not it's a bad thing, but having a look through the research, and Gallup are very good at this, and what they've found is in the organizations they've worked with, so happy to send this link, which is they surveyed 1.2 million employees across just under 50,000 business units in 22 organizations, and found the following impact when they measured implementing a strength-based culture into these organizations. So these numbers are quite great. Any percentage shift going forward is always a great thing, and particularly around the safety incidences as well. Obviously increased sales and increased profit. But I think if I come back to the conversation that Viola and I were just talking about, the inner development goals, as we start to see a real shift, a profound shift, I think, in that organizations have to be much more human-centric, and they have to be willing to invest in their people authentically, then actually engaged employees with fewer safety instances, with people feeling like they are, and the metric they miss here, I feel valued at work. I feel seen at work. I feel like I can do my best, be my best self at work. We've moved away from those metrics as well. And I think we need to shift back to those. And I think the strength movement can help us do that. And a conversation we had yesterday around personality at the heart of learning and development, and being more human-centric, I think strengths can play a nice active role in that process. Maybe people with much lower affection and higher will say it's quite altruistic and naive, but we have to start somewhere. When we then had a look across some of the organizations again, and we're looking at the attributes of a strength-based approach, what these organizations were doing, there was a whole range of different things that they were focusing on. So instead of fixing weaknesses, they were focusing on strengths. They were helping people with that language, helping identify where they fit, and therefore the type of roles and assignments that work best for them. So this is quite a shift to the role-based and role purpose statements and things like that, to being a little bit more open to a community of people based on a series of strengths and what they need and who they need it from in order to achieve that. I focus on continuous tailored training and development. So this is this mastery concept. So while you may have strengths, they may not turn up always well. And you may actually need then to figure out how to, given your circumstance or context, how to flex those, but how to do that from a point of, what's the word I'm looking for, of knowing. And I use this analogy, and I did have a picture which I deleted, which is, when people often ask us, what do we focus on around development? I often use an analogy around football or soccer, which is, if you imagine that you're coming into work and you've got your football gear on, you're all kitted out, you're looking amazing, and you've got the goal in front of you. You can see the goal in front. So you're going to try and strike that ball. But actually what you do is you look down and realize that the ball is 3 feet to your right. So it doesn't matter how much you swing, how much you go to kick, and what you do, there is less chance of you scoring that goal. And what we do, and what they do here through that continuing development, is not only build skill, but reposition you in front of the ball, understanding that actually in this situation, you need to flex 3 feet to the right or 3 feet to the left. So it's about positioning and understanding and giving you that skill in order to do that. You still need to practice, you still need to master, you just still need to, work at it. But this is all about just helping you look down and look around and go, okay, where do I need to position myself to be successful? Positive work environment, cultures that tend to foster positivity, for example, recognition and reward in a way that recognizes people for their efforts and what they contribute, not so much for what the organization has made in terms of financial income, for example. So and that again kind of circles back to the more human-centric element, but also the individual development goals and the IDG more broadly, is that shareholder value is only one mechanism of success, and profit is only one indication of success. Now, I'm not saying we should move away from that, the world would collapse. I'm just saying that we need a better balance. We've done a lot of work before coming to the UK, and 15 years ago now, we did a lot of work around a concept called the men's shed. And I don't know if you have that here, but it's basically was done around bringing, at this stage, it was about bringing more mature and retired men coming together to talk about their health. There was a big prostate cancer issue, a depression issue, people who had lost their partners and didn't know what to do with themselves. So bringing them together, it gave them access to other people. It gave them something, and they were creating things. It was a woodworking experience, so they were creating things for the community. What we also realized was that there was a bunch of younger people in the community who may have struggled. They have, their first child, and they really struggled with integrating into society, and whether that was drugs and alcohol or violence or prison time, for example. And what we did was integrate those individuals with these more parent-like figures and brought them together. And the feedback is that when you are seen, that I felt seen by somebody else, that I was recognized in my community as me, that I brought something unique into that relationship. It wasn't all one-sided. So I think when I talk about being seen and valued in an organization, and I think then the strengths play really uniquely into that, because you are seen for who you are and what you can contribute, regardless of everything else that's going around you. And for me, that's a positive work environment. Obviously, enhancing team performance, knowing your own strength, knowing other people's strengths, and having the safety and the structure in order to leverage that as well. So Martin said really nicely about, that mentoring concept, that peer-to-peer support, being able to leverage on each other in order to get stuff done. A stronger focus on employee engagement, so that's, we often say, what gets done is what gets measured gets done, which is a really important thing. So we're putting more attention to that. A broader concept, and this is coming forward more and more, the leader as coach mindset as well. Leaders have a huge responsibility, they have a huge opportunity as well, but giving leaders more than just a hammer to work with, the whole toolkit, including a coaching mindset, being able to access then a reciprocal conversation about allowing the leader to work with more and have the individual work with more in their conversations and that coaching and mentoring process. And a language to better support or support better communication and conversations. Now we do that, I think we do that well with Facet5 anyway. We try to make a non-judgmental, non-emotive language, something that people can pick up and use, and it's understandable. And I think the strength-based approach is doing that as well. I do debate, though, that there are some strengths that I struggle to get to terms with when they use the word woo or advancer, or words which are brought together, which then I have to kind of interpret and make sense of. I think a language which is a little bit clearer and a little bit more day-to-day and a little bit more widely understood maybe moves this along a little bit further. Right, I'll stop there again. Any thoughts on any of that rambling? Have you been in the work that you've been doing yourselves in any of the coaching? Have you seen any of that? Have you been applying any of that in the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, well, like I was saying previously, focusing on the use of the facet, and when we do our debrief at the end, often with a coachee, we're able to also help them to focus on where their strengths are and how those strengths in their current role, because it also is about their current role, how they can best leverage that strength.
Yeah.
And we have found that also, and we've been working a lot with leaders and giving them that those skills about as a coach, which often is another aspect of their communication and in their toolbox as a leader, which they previously, underestimated the importance of asking, the right questions and how that really engages their employees and makes them more responsible and accountable. And so I can only say good things about, helping people to take those areas of their strengths and making sure that they're leveraging upon them in their roles, and recognizing, at the same time, we also work with them on areas for improvement. We don't only focus on the strength, but helping, that certainly helps them psychologically, in terms of recognizing that it's not about filling the gap, like you pointed out earlier. It's also about, it's leveraging the strength. So, I mean, I can't really say more positive things about it.
Yeah, but I think it also plays into what you were talking about yesterday in terms of well-being and recognizing, being grateful, for example, and having gratitude in how we're turning up, that reciprocates all the way through our mental and physical system and emotional system and spiritual systems. But also it stops it from being top down as well. We're empowering people from the bottom up. We're having a more collaborative conversations, as opposed to waiting always for the manager, always for the leader to initiate things. We're giving people permission to sort of give them a language and lift themselves up and put their hand up, and to work more collaboratively, I suppose, with their leaders as well. Yeah. Julie?
Sure. Yeah, I think as well, I think it's helping people to find their own inner confidence again. I think the last few years have potentially knocked quite a few people in the workplace, and perhaps they're not sure actually what they're good at anymore, because other stuff has come along and, taken their focus elsewhere. So actually, to come back to a strengths approach that comes back to them and what's at their core, I think it's quite empowering for people to actually take that moment and think about them again, instead of whatever else that they've been navigating over these past few years.
Yeah, I think that's actually the heart of the debrief as well for me in any profile or any coaching conversation. It's about sitting comfortably in a space that you can, metaphorically take that coat of worries and expectations and work and hang it on a hook at the door. And it's going to be there, and probably people are putting stuff in the pockets as you're away, but it allows you then to come in and feel unencumbered by all of that, so that you can have that conversation. Because it's, I always ask people, when was the last time you had an hour or an hour and a half with somebody just talking about you with no judgment? And we just don't do that. We don't do that in a way that is non-judgmental, but we don't also advocate for that to be done in more micro situations, in reflective habits as well. And I think that process is a really powerful mechanism. Alan, I'm going to come back to your point, because I'm going to answer that in a minute, around identifying how our strengths may turn up in risks in different ways. So, conscious of the time, and I'm going to move through. So what's our approach here at Facet5? I think all of those great benefits are amazing, all these activities, but what that requires, and what it always starts with, is awareness, self-awareness around what your strengths are. So our partners would have known that this is coming, and Julie certainly knows. But what we have done and what we're talking about today is introducing a new key qualities profile. Okay, so this is our strength profile, version of a strength profile. It's expanding on the key qualities that are on the front of the profile, the word cloud, and expanding that out with all new content that we've written, particularly around those key qualities, and in particular around celebrating and helping people identify their strengths. They represent a new way, I suppose, of engaging and understanding a personality based on more of a strength-based language. It will feel quite familiar to a lot of people who are already practitioners. And what we're looking to do is provide a language, I suppose, that is practical, used day to day, recognizable and understood by other people, and that act as kind of building blocks for strength understanding and strength use. Yeah. Great. So let me take you through what a key qualities profile looks like. It consists of 13 key qualities. These relate to each of the subfactors. So if you understand the word cloud and you've been using that, you're a practitioner. For those people who aren't, we have 5 factors and 13 subfactors within our model. The key qualities, the words that you come from there, come from each of those subfactors. So one word represents each of that key qualities. So it's in the traits that you have, we're representing them here just in a short form in a word format. These act as a shorthand language. You think about, some of mine are goal focused, creative, enthusiastic, as well. And I would often use that language. People describe my style. They kind of use that shorthand language as well. We've also integrated, as you may be aware, that the word cloud, all those key qualities across personal profile, across Teamscape, across super skills, and also available in the My Facet5 web app. What we're doing is bringing together then a series of new content. It's about 600 pages of new content that we've written overall. Julie and I are still feeling the scars of some of that writing. But basically, we group those into 13 key qualities into the 5 domains. So we're talking about now about decision-making and goal setting. We're talking about engaging and collaborating. We're talking about some of those bigger blocks, and they relate to the 5 major factors as well, as you can see here. Each description provides a snapshot of a person's strength, and there's 2 description levels. Here we've got a short description level, and in the profile proper, there's a longer expanded description as well. And if you're familiar with Spotlight, we do provide a code to help you understand how much of that key quality stands out for you in comparison to other people. So the more we have that key quality, more it stands out, the code there is going to represent that. The way that we do that is that we take our data and we apply it across a bell curve. So it's the same measure that we're using with the same questionnaire, same algorithm, and the same measure of how we go about doing that. The further you get away from our midpoint, which is 5.5 in our scale, the words on your word cloud will become bigger, because statistically there's less people like you with that key quality. So that's going to become more evident for you. It's going to stand out. To Michiel's point, people will probably know you for those attributes. As you get further into the mid-range, which represents, between 4 to 7 there, the pink, purple, and blue, it represents about 68% of that comparison group. So it's going to feel more familiar, and the word becomes a little bit smaller. It's no less important. That's the key thing. It just becomes more consistent with other people around you. And you can see here that as the coding that we put on there, we represent, as you get further away, you're quite different to most people around you. As you come towards the center, you start getting more familiar, right through to you're more consistent with other people around you. Each of our key qualities we rely on every day. We have access to these key qualities really instantly. They are kind of just here waiting to be used. It doesn't mean that we get access to them or that we rely on all of them. We may over-rely on some of them at any particular time. And you can see here how we've gone about doing that. So we've got our overall key quality, for example, and there's 39 key words that we use across the 13 subfactors. So each subfactor has 3 descriptions, but we use a whole range of different texts depending on how you score within those. And you can start to see we also apply a font change. So the further you get away, the more that stands out for you. Not only do we provide a visual cue here, but also a text cue. So the font changes as well. So we're trying to help people understand. In here, there's a range of things in here that really stand out for me that will be quite different to people around me. In the report then itself, we then take each of the key qualities and we break those out into a page per key quality. So we start with, what does it actually measure? So here we're talking about your inner drive to commit to your own ideas and set goals for yourself and for other people. And therefore, what's the great thing about your approach when we do that? So if you're flexible, the great thing lies in your open-mindedness and your willingness to view other people's approaches differently and take those on board to inform your opinions before making decisions. We wanted then to say, well, so what? That's a great description, but what do you actually do with that? And so we're giving you a couple of areas that people can then naturally, you can use or they can use to apply their work. So you bring your open-mindedness, help create innovative thinking, create the cultural or role model that we can get a better outcome when we're a little bit more broad. Don't stick to your guns as much, or, you know, help people see different perspectives, use that natural open-minded approach to do that. To your point, Alan, as well, we also make sure that while we have a great strength, then there are some times that we need to be conscious of when that strength may be overplayed. When we over-rely on that, and we don't sort of stretch our style or flex our style in order to do that well. And then some coaching advice for the individual around how to maybe leverage his strengths a little bit more or moderate when those strengths are overplayed. So overall, 13 key qualities with a total of 16 pages. So it's quite a comprehensive report, a new report for individuals. It's the first time we've written this level of detail at a subfactor level as well. So it is all new content. Total of 39 leveraging coaching statements per report. For Facet5 practitioners, it is independent of other reports. You do not need to purchase a Facet5 profile or a teaming report or a spotlight report. You can purchase this report separately. It uses the same questionnaire and the same scoring process, the same validity and reliability. We are just bringing the data forward in a different way. It's only available in English just at the moment until we finish the testing and then start quite a large translation process. We work in 38 languages, so you can imagine 600 pages of content by 38 languages. It's a big job. And then it's importantly designed as a self-interpreting report. What we wanted to do was be able to give people some content that they can sit comfortably with and interpret themselves. Now, it's not to say that this wouldn't be enhanced through a coaching or debrief process. And Julie and I are working on those tools for you at the moment. A couple of other points around that is all of the content here is complementary to other reports that we already have. It's not a competing set of content. It should feel natural and continuous through all the content. We're not introducing new concepts here. We're expanding on current concepts. If you are using other strength-based tools, which tend to provide the why and we provide more of the, sorry, we support more of the why versus they're supporting the what. So they tend to be more competency or strength-based, trait-based stuff, talking about how you go about being a communicator, how you go about being an advancer or a strategist, for example. We tell you why. And it's interesting, having done a range of different strength profiles over the last number of years, what I do find is that I get a consistent number of those popping up into my top 5 or top 10. And actually, when I look back at my personality profile, I can tell you why. I can tell you because I've got strong determination. I've got mid-range confrontation. I've got too much energy that I know what to do with, not enough control to get me out of trouble, for example. And those aspects of my personality are bubbling up in these other strength-based tools. So we're not saying don't use them. We're just saying, actually, we can enhance the understanding of that more foundational or knowledge about why they turn up the way that they do. I think it also provides that important language and advice about the so what, which is in how you go about leveraging those strengths. This is not the fait accompli. It is not just because it's in black and white that it means it isn't the only thing that people will know. It's about helping extend out that language of vocabulary of strengths, and then for them to draw on examples of where these are coming forward. It's just a starting point, not the be all and end all. And with that, you know, when we start working with individuals and we're working with them in a coaching perspective, these sort of things start to come together quite naturally. You're pulling on different strengths in different scenarios, for example, also understanding where you may be over-relying on different combinations and how they turn up for the individual.